How's it going, guys? Burrito here. Gonna show you the deck profile for the first place Royal Knights at the Versus Gaming Regional in Orlando. That happened, in-person regional that happened this past weekend. My buddy here, AJ, who is a local homie of mine, got first place with the deck. And without further ado, we're gonna have him show you the deck profile. So, AJ, take it away.
Alrighty, hello everybody. So, won this past weekend playing Royal Knights. The deck list is a little bit more on the aggressive side of some tech pieces, and let me just get started with the first piece, the most important card in the deck, your King Drazel. Run 4 copies of it, obviously. The Egg gives us our play cost reduction, our win con, our defensive tool with Omni X. Everybody needs to play it. Don't let the people that you've heard say, I want a game without playing Drazel dissuade you. Next, I'm playing 4 copies of Omni X. Strongest card in the deck probably on its own, can win you games on its own. Blocker, very aggressive piece if you can get out early, can remove pretty much anything at 16 KDP. It also sometimes can require Hudie to really try and funnel a lot of DP minus into it, especially if it's earlier in the game, but that usually will not happen. You're really going to be saving this for combos later on down the line as you go through it. Next up also, 4 other key pieces of the deck. We have 4 copies of the Cool Boy. Play cost reduction by gaining new memory back, the draw, and its ability on your opponent's turn to play out Omegamons is extremely valuable, both with the BT20 Omegamon and the BT13 Omegamon. Sometimes it gives you extra chip just by existing. And depending on when you trigger its effect when you play your knight, it can kind of open up different lines of play depending on the knight that you do play out. After that, the
Can you put
next...
the cards upside down? So like,
Oh, yep.
yeah,
Sorry.
awesome.
You want me to start over then?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. So put them down like this.
Boom. Same with the eggs.
Then, same with the eggs, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Put
Thank
back
you.
here like that. 4 copies of the egg right there. So then
Yeah.
we have 4 copies of the BT20 Omegamon right here. Blocker, 5k ADP, so it can block very few 3k and 4k bodies. That actually came up a few times against Jesmon in the tournament, him just being able to block, stick around, and then chip for a bit of damage. Additionally, his ability to just play out combo with Cool Boy and Omni X, just warp into Omni X, as everybody knows, is extremely invaluable.
Would you
After that,
say these pieces are like a mandatory 4 of like it's
yes.
unadvisable to run any less?
Yes, every piece that I'm showing right now is a mandatory 4 of, and later there are some options that are also a mandatory 4 of.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
The final mandatory 4 of, in my opinion, that we have is the new Magna. New Magna is super strong, especially in the mirror, if you don't have your Dynasmon up as a counter, and I'll explain why. So super cheap as your turn 1 play, that I would ideally in every single scenario in any single matchup love him as a turn 1 play just for 2 memory. If your opponent tries to be cheeky and choke you to 1 if they're going first by evoing a rookie in the back for 1 memory, you get to choke them back to 1 for that, which usually is very punishing because you can do a lot more with 1 memory than most of the decks can. The draw as well is very invaluable because you're usually only doing 1 play per turn, you're not searching multiple pieces, although you can do that now with things like Digital Gate Open, which I'll get to later. And the bounce protection comes up against a few decks, especially if you try to play around Omni X in a way. Let's say you have a, well, I'll get to that later, but a Systemon and a Magnamon out, you can completely protect your Alphamon Ouryuken from your opponent's Omni X, which can very much so just really just keep you in the game as you're trying to push for game. Next up, card that has kind of had a lot of discussion amongst Royal Knights players into how many copies you want to play is the BT13 Omegamon. There was a time a few sets ago where many people said that they only wanted to play this at 1 copy, if at that, if at all. However, as we've lost Purge at 4 and have it down to 1, its ability to place a knight in your sources safely has become so valuable. You really want to use it for chip damage, the extra draw, and being able to tuck your Ouryuken safely in a matchup that could easily remove him is also extremely important, because that just sets up your OTK later on down the line.
And it combos up well with the Cool Boy, right? Because then you get to like play it out for free. You don't always have to
Oh
play
yeah,
out the BT21.
if you have a, there were a few matches in the tournament where I had 2 Cool Boys out. They attempted to remove, let's say, an Omni X that I had protection for. I would then trigger both the opponent turn effects when it would leave to play out 2 of them, and then let the Cool Boys, and then let the protection option protect the Omni X. So I end up getting 3 bodies instead of 2, and then I still have a big blocker.
That's sick.
That in itself then just gives you 2 chip damage, which usually can equal 2 cost reduction for your next knight, and that could easily enable a BT13 Omni play. There was one match, for example, where I did that exact same play, played out 2 Omechas, swung, they both died, because I just swung them into my opponent's suspended, I think, Jesmon, and then I tucked in Jesmon of my own and Alphamon Ouryuken, which I'm about to get to. And then that just enabled my BT13 Omnimon to just do its play and go for game.
Nice, dude. Nice.
Next up, we have 3 copies of the BT20 Jesmon, another big enabler for the deck. The blocker decoy, super useful for not just chip damage, protecting your knights from decks that would want to pop you. I didn't run into much of that at this specific tournament run. However, being able to have an extra body out is always useful with this deck, especially when most of the knights that we run now are black or red in some way, shape, or form. Being able to pop an 8K also gives you a lot of flexibility into some matchups, depending on what you do and do not want to pop. Because there are some cases, for example, against Hudie, where you don't want to pop their 8K, but if they have like a smaller 5 or 6K, you do, because you don't want to give them too many bodies. Next up, we have probably top 3 most important cards in the deck, I think. Alphamon Ouryuken. DP minus removal is still the best removal in the game. Minus 15k premium DP reduction to the end of your opponent's turn. Extremely valuable, especially when you have cases of your opponent playing Gankoo Jes, giving all their guys immunity. You just nuke a body, wait until their next turn, and then that'll just leave them with nothing much to do if all they have is, like, let's say, a Sistermon and a Gankoomon. There's not much they can do, especially if you remove the correct Sistermons. Its all turns ability is what enables you to win the game, especially when you only have, let's say, 3 knights in your cost reduction, because just having these 2 and this Magnamon in my sources means that my BT13 Omni can almost always go for game, because that equals 5 swings. And if I have an Omni X in my hand for that, then that's just GG on the spot. Alphamon Ouryuken also has a really niche interaction with a lot of your other knights. If I have a Jesmon and one of my black or yellow Royal Knights out, I can just, after I do my BT13 Omni play, Evo DNA into him. And that just allows me to get 3 extra memory, another big bunch of removal if they have a complicated board state that I do have to deal with, and then I also trash the security. It's a very flexible card, especially if you position yourself to be able to utilize it for the DNA play for your BT13 Omni push.
That's
Speaking
sick,
of,
dude. That's sick.
we have 3 copies of BT13 Omni right here. That is your main push for game. There was a little while there in BT20, especially in BT21 when he had Purge at 4, where he was not as valuable. I ran him at a regional that I topped in June at 2 copies, I believe. However, back then with Purge at 4, you're able to be much more aggressive than you are now. At 3 copies, I think is mandatory. 4 is a little too much because you want space for other things. And sometimes his on-play delete a Digimon does come up when you have no other recourse. It's usually really expensive and you'd really rather not do it. I thankfully did not have to do it at this tournament, but that's also a play that you have that can come up sometimes. Destroy your Drazel, play out your Knights. There was a situation where I had 2 Ouryukens in my sources for Drazel, and the ruling is that if I was to play it out, I can only play out one of them. I would overflow 5. I had a purge out, so then I just purged out one of the Ouryukens, played him out, and then I essentially just gained 6 memory off of the Omni X play once I removed a security stack on my turn.
That's crazy, dude.
Yes, yes. And that just allowed me to really do a super aggressive, greedy play for the finish, because my opponent had 6 security at the time. Next, we have one card that I run at 2 copies, the Dynasmon from BT23. Extremely important card. It's probably the best recovery Royal Knight, just because of its all turns. If you have 3 or fewer security after security is removed, you get to recover 1. He also has Barrier, and he gets Sec Plus with his all turns after recovering. That's extremely important because he is essentially functioning as a Jesmon replacement if you consider that both of these cards give you 2 security checks equivalent to each other when you do your BT13 Omni play. The most important use of this card, however, is the either Hudie if they have no Keyscays out, or even more importantly, the Royal Knights matchup. Playing him out with your BT13 Omni in a Royal Knights matchup completely invalidates the BT20 Omega defensive play from tapping your King Drazel to then play out the BT20 Omega to then warp into Omni X. Since you gave your opponent's entire field minus 6k for the turn, you just kind of play him out and you just invalidate anything they can do against you. There's nothing that can be done.
So would you say the Dynas essentially wins you the mirror?
Yes, correct. In the final round of the tournament was my second mirror of the day, and I kept a sort of suboptimal hand that had him because it would allow me to then push for game.
Nice. For that reason, would you say 2 of is enough, or maybe up him to 3? Do you think he's also valuable in other matchups that are
I
not
think
Hudie, not Hudie
yeah,
or the mirror?
I think he's great in the Jesmon matchup. You usually wipe out all their Sistermons just by playing him. And you reduce the amount of checks they can do to you by 1, essentially. If I could do one change to my deck list for this past weekend, it would be to run him at 2 copies instead of 3. Because right now I'm going to go through the Royal Knights that I run at 1 copy each. I run 1 copy of the Craniamon, 1 copy of the Alphamon, 1 copy of the Lord Knightmon, and 1 copy of Gallant back over here. So let me move that there for the glare, just so you can see it a little bit better.
Nice, thank you.
So the Crania is the one card that I would have removed for this past weekend. It didn't come up a single time. Its protection effect is very powerful. All turns it can suspend itself to prevent any of your Royal Knight trait Digimon from leaving the field, and when it suspends, it pops all of your opponent's lowest play costs. However, there isn't a single matchup this weekend where that effect itself was very valuable or would have been. Because most, let's say, matchups you would have, Hudie would just remove this on the spot, and if it gets removed by DP minus, it will not get its all turns, its deletion effect off.
Yeah, it gets
And
deleted
against
before that.
Jesmon, which is the other deck that goes wide, they usually run Sistermons that go at various levels, various play costs, which then you just pop a Blanc, and then they still have 6 other bodies. So that is one change that I would make.
Yeah, you would think that card, like, it's more
Oh
valuable
yeah.
just because of how well it reads, but
Oh yeah.
just to reiterate, it did not come up at all this weekend.
Not a single time. Not a single time. And I was debating before the tournament if I should drop this copy for another Dynas. The outcome didn't change, but you know, I still think that is objectively the better play.
Nice.
The BT23 Gallantmon stops your opponent from playing cards from the trash. I didn't match up into Mastimon this past weekend or any deck that really did that outside of Jesmon. But in the Jesmon matchup, like the card itself did not come up. I did use it, however, for its deletion effect a few times when I did not have any other deletion options available to me to pop in 11k. So that itself was pretty useful. Over here, the Lord Knightmon from BT20. Super great because it gets to play out your Omegamon, your Magnamon, or your BT13 Omegamon from trash, as well as a card that I'm going to mention now in a bit. The BT20 Lord Knight also has a redirect effect, which is extremely useful, especially in some matchups where you don't care if it goes into sources or not, because if your Jesmon opponent, for example, does not have piercing, then you just redirect it into this guy, and like there goes all 3 of the security checks that they wanted to do. And
Nice.
that makes that matchup for us, I feel, very favorable.
Nice.
And then, the card that is probably the, if not most contentious, one of the most debated, the BT20 Alphamon. A lot of lists replace him with the Promo Gallant. I am not running the Promo Gallantmon. I think that the Promo Gallantmon is a waste of a slot because ideally, if you just want to go for the win with BT13 Omni play, you'll be getting your chip in with one of your smaller bodies, which is what that one would be doing. And I think that the alterns and recovery, the way you get it with this Alphamon, is much more useful. The alterns minus 8k also enables you, if you order your effects correctly when the security is removed, what you DP minus, to just remove an opponent's entire field. I had a situation, for example, where an opponent of mine's Sistermon swung in. I had him out. I revealed this card over here, the Lord Knightmon. Minus 8k'd his 9k Savior Huckmon, which got the 1k DP boost from the Sistermon. Sistermon died in battle, then the minus 8k just ended up dealing the Savior Huck, and he had no field.
Nice.
So
nice.
That card is super flexible. It's also extremely useful in the Hudie matchup. And additionally, it's all turns inheritable to protect your Alphamon Ouryuken from leaving the field if it would leave by trashing your top security card. Can come up, and it did come up once. I had a game
in the tournament,
where
it came up?
It did.
Ooh.
So I had a game where I DNA'd this Jesmon and this Alphamon together into an Ouryuken because I did not have an Ouryuken in the sources, but for the Drazel, but I was able to keep turn with my cool boys after playing BT13 Omni. And I trashed the second to last security with the DNA effect, and when I swung in, I hit into an Omni X. It would have deleted my Ouryuken, and then I would have overflowed 5, but because I had the Alphamon in the sources, because it's all turns when this is going to leave the battle area other than by your effects, by trashing my top security card, it doesn't leave if it has Ouryuken in the name. I was able to just keep him on the field, trash my top, do the swing, and then swing for game with Omni X. So that's a super niche way to sort of, you got to keep an eye out to see if you're able to do that, especially if you have the second one in hand. It's not necessarily going to be a dead card, especially if you have either this guy and this guy, or this guy and this guy. It's a combination of your knights. The Dynasmon is also a DNA target. The Crania, basically all of these knights are a DNA target for the Dynasmon. So I'm just going to stack these up here in a way where you can see them a little bit.
Nice. Yeah.
And then now we're going to enter the options and the tech choices. Those are all of my knights. So first, one copy of Royal Knights of the Purge. As we know, I would run this at 4 in a heartbeat if we could. It got hit to 1. Invaluable. It can tuck your Ouryuken in safely. It gives you a draw. It can tuck your Omegamon in if you don't have another knight target that you want to put in. It sets you up for the turn if your opponent hits that in security. It's fantastic because then all of a sudden you have an extra bit of aggression the turn after, especially if you did what, for example, what I mentioned earlier, had 2 Ouryukens in my sources. Great card. Next, we have 4 copies of the Last Guardian. I'll put this one right here next to it. Right there.
Yeah, that's fine. We can.
So Last Guardian, I figured the white would make the glare less apparent.
Good.
So Last Guardian searches your top three, gets you a Cool Boy and an X antibody or a Knight. So basically, almost your entire deck. When hidden security, you can sack your opponent really bad. That didn't happen this tournament. But if it plays on a Omegamon from your trash and you don't have one in sources, you have one or fewer, all of a sudden your Omni X is live. Play out a Cool Boy for free, which can be super useful early on if your opponent trying to get some early aggression. And just keeping your Omni X around is such an invaluable play because it can just swing without suspending, or it can set you up for this one of Crimson Mode Ace that I am running with its on. When attacking for every 10 cards in both players' trash, you get to trash your opponent's top security card. Those sorts of interactions just make this card extremely strong. Being able to keep this guy around as well for any deletion effects, anything, it's just also really good. And this also did come up in the tournament, keeping BT13 Omni around, very important. When he would swing 14k DP, could die to a 14k, 15k, or 16k. Keep him around so then you can just Evo for 2 into the Omni X if you don't have 16 memory to just hard drop him after you already did the BT13 Omni play. So very important, especially if your other knights died and you don't have a blue or red target. Then we have 2 copies of the Sistermon Blanc from the Jesmon starter deck. So Sistermon Blanc, decoy red black or decoy for Royal Knight trait, if you have a Royal Knight trait, I should say. But you can sometimes trash cards that are irrelevant in a matchup. So for example, if I see in my hand that I have this Crimson Mode Ace, and I know for a fact in that matchup I'm not going to get a good chance to use it. Let's say for example in Hudie, because they're usually going to kill your red bodies before you'd even be able to ace on top of them. There are multiple cards in the deck that are free trash targets to just keep on cycling and get to your key cards faster. Additionally, it's extra chip damage, and it's a target for the Lord Knightmon right over here for you to just continuously get extra draws and chip in. Then we have my boy right here, Marcus Damon from BT21. The idea for him initially, when a lot of people look at the surface level, is that he removes floodgates. I did not prioritize him for the floodgate removal because he just acts as a red source for my Crimson Blazes. The start memory gain at turn for opponent's Digimon, also pretty useful. But he could remove floodgates. He could also just act primarily as a Crimson Blaze enabler. Next up, my favorite tech choice that I made for this tournament by far, BT13 Keen and Crier. So BT13 Keen and Crier, on play, your opponent can trash an option or tamer card in their hand, and then if they don't, you gain a memory and draw a card. Additionally, on your opponent's turn, when any Digimon is played by an effect, you can tap them to gain a memory. So a couple use cases that you have with this card there. Depending on the order that you do your play on your turn, you could gain a memory back and get a draw to then choke your opponent at 1, depending on when you play this guy. Additionally, if you're making the right reads based off what your opponent searches from their deck, and also the matchup that you're in, that this guy is sometimes almost always going to be a gain 1, draw 1. Additionally, let's say you're at 0 memory, your opponent plays a Digimon by an effect. They don't realize what he does. You can tap him, gain a memory, and steal turn. Or my favorite instance, this came up quite a few times. I was kind of surprised at the tournament. They would swing at security for like a chip at 0 memory. I had a BT20 Omegamon in my Drazel sources. They swing, I tap the Drazel, play out the Omegamon, tap the Keenan because it's not just your opponent's Digimon that it recognizes, it's also your own. Gain the memory, they do the chip damage, and then I steal turn at 1. And then that gives me an extra chip damage to the Omegamon, or, depending on what the sources I have are available there, could just set me up for game, which did happen.
That's sick, dude.
Yeah. And then we got 2 more cards to go through here. I'm going to stack these tamers up just for space.
Yeah, if you want, you can also put like the one-ofs like stacked up together.
Yeah. I'll do that right now. Just move them right over here. So, next up we have 2. Put it right here. Digital Gate Open. New promo card that just came out. It's fantastic. Searches Digimon and Tamer for your deck. This is the Bandai Card Fest alt art. That's why it looks a little nicer than when you get from your locals tournament. Its delay effect to play out a Tamer whose color matches any of your Digimon can come up in multiple cases. For example, Dynasmon counts for Marcus, as does Jesmon, for example. The Jesmon one didn't come up. It only really came up whenever I had Dynas and Alphamon out. Sometimes I'd use the DGO delay effect to play out the Marcus. I did that twice, I think, in my tournament run. Most of the time, however, you're just going to be using it to play out your Cool Boy for free. If you're in a matchup that has Tamer removal, which I didn't really run into any at my tournament, you just keep the option in the back, wait until your turn so you can for sure get a Cool Boy effect off, and then force their hand after the fact. It's a fantastic card at 4 because you don't care really much about passing memory in most situations with this deck because you usually have some form of counterplay. And then the MVP, the big kahuna of the event, 3 of Crimson Blaze. So let me move that over here because I realize that you can't see that.
Literally just put on the center of the playmat. It's the MVP.
I'll put on the center of the playmat right here. The
There
MVP.
you go.
Crimson Blaze. 3 copies. This card's amazing in this meta right now. It ruins the day of any Jesmon player. It ruins the day of any Hudie player. It ruins the day of any Omni DNA player. It ruins the day of, let me think, Macth. It also ruins the day of Royal Knights players. If you time this card correctly, you just win on the spot because you interrupt them enough to give you as much tempo as you need for the next turn. And there are enough red sources in here, Marcus, OmniX, that allow you to just play it. And so many decks that it's really good for go wide that you usually will be paying 2 or 3 memory for it, which means depending on how you organize your plays on your turn, you can choke your opponent out 1 by playing Crimson, which then puts them in an unwinnable position. Additionally, it's at 3 copies. That ups your percentage chance of it being in security. And with things like Dynasmon and Alphamon back here, it will find a way usually to be in your security at least 1 copy. There was one instance in the tournament where if it was in security, I probably would have lost that match. It was one of the cards that I recovered into with the Alphamon in the back. And I want to say that's the only instance in the tournament where luck played a piece, but I was running this at 2 copies with a Hokuto. I removed the Hokuto just for a 3rd Crimson Blaze, so that in itself is extremely valuable. Plus, sometimes, even if you played for 6 memory, it's the right play. There was one game against Hudie on the tournament where I was able to just drop it for 6, and they weren't able to do anything on their turn because they can't play anything out by effect. They just played Tamer, played a boost, or a Karemi Detective Agency, and that was that. Then on my turn, I was able to just do my plays to set up much more efficiently and then go from there. And that's the list.
So first we'll get into deck changes, then we'll get into briefly the matchups.
Sure.
What, like a little bit more detail on like what changes you'd make, because you mentioned it earlier. Would Crimson Blaze be a 4 of?
No, I would not run that on 4 of. 3, I think, is the sweet spot. There are some lists that run Congo and Crimson Blaze. I think Congo is terrible. I think it's a bad card. I don't want to run it just because there are some matchups where it's just dead in. And I'd rather have a card that is useful 80% of the time.
Okay.
When it comes to the deck changes, the only change I would make, like I said earlier, with this list right now is I drop this Craniumon for a 3rd Dynasmon. Other than that, I think this is as good and as efficient as Roll Knights gets right now in the current meta.
Nice. Third Dynasmon.
I think that this Keenan is just superior to Hokuto in every way because it gives you a lot more flexibility to use it in. And even though some people argue that the Crimson Mode Ace is a win more card, it did win me the little interaction of OmniX and Crimson Mode Ace 2 games. So.
Okay. Would you drop the Crimson Mode Ace to add consistency somewhere else? Like, for example, would you drop that to maybe add a 4th BT13 Omega or a 4 of another Royal Knight?
Not at all, because having the Jesmon, and after I make the change to the Dynasmon, at 6 cards in total in the deck as an ace target, some decks, like Jesmon for example, when they swing, they will be passing turn as they do the swing. So that just allows you to kill all their Omegamon or all their sisters. It does not get absorbed by Drazel, so if you have OmniX in your hand, that could potentially be game. Or it's just an emergency type of removal. You know, like when your back's really up against the wall.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Now let's get into some of your matchups. Do you remember your matchups? Do you have them written down?
Yes, I do. I got them by memory. So round 1 was a Royal Knights matchup. I don't think.
Let's make this kind of brief, so you can, because AJ is also going to be on the DigiDorks podcast, and I know he's going to get more in depth with that. So just I guess briefly, you went undefeated. You beat them all.
Yes. I only dropped 2 games in the entire tournament run. One to my round 3 Jesmon opponent, and then once again another game to my round 7 Hudie opponent. Those are the only games that I dropped. Every other match was a clean 2-0.
Nice.
So to go over it briefly. My round 1 opponent was playing a slow Royal Knights variant, so I was able to just stall them out with a Crimson Blaze on a turn and then just aggressively push with the Dynasmon and then win. And I did that both games.
So you said round 1 was Jesmon?
Royal Knights.
Oh, Royal Knights.
Round 3 was Jesmon. It just came up in terms of
Gotcha. So
round 2 was Omni DNA. Opponent made a few misplays that I didn't let him take back, and that just set me up to be able to go for a game. There was one turn where he almost won, but he hit into a Crimson Blaze in security, so he wasn't able to utilize the effect of Alter S. So that just kind of went from there, and I was able to get it 2-0. Round 3 was a Jesmon opponent, completely aggro Jesmon, the only Jesmon I know of in the tournament that ended up topping without Gankoo. I think my opponent got 10th place. He game one blew me out completely. He just hard dropped he had a bow hook in the back, and he hard dropped the savior hook from his hand, and he just popped off, went right into Jesmon, and just I had no chance. He put me down to one security almost immediately, and then I just had to scoop it up because I knew there was nothing I could do. The next two games, I was able to strategically use my Crimson Blazes alongside the interaction of Alphamon and Alphamon Ouryuken to win. Then my round 4 opponent, Gankoo Turtle Jesmon. Gankoo Turtle, I think, is a very free matchup for Royal Knights because they don't really do anything. They make a big wide board that you can just take advantage of very easily because they give you so much memory. If there's one deck, even more than Hudie in my opinion, that you don't want to give more than 4 memory to on a turn, it's this deck right here. And they just pass you to 5 or at 6 by playing Gankoo. And they don't have, if they're not running anything that gives them piercing, you just block it with like an Omegamon, a Magnamon, or whatever else, and then they just, what do? Nothing, and then you just take it from there. Round 5 was a Hudie opponent. They were playing the option heavy list of it. I did not have any matchup experience into the option variant of Hudie, which I was kind of worried by, given how the matchup is so unfavored for Royal Knights going up against regular Hudie Loop. That was surprisingly very simple and easy. I think that losing some aggression pieces for them really makes it much more easy for me to find the pieces I need at a right time frame or speed, to just take it from there. So that was a quick 2-0 again. Round 6 was another Gankoo Jesmon matchup. Same exact deal. They passed me to 5-6 memory, and I could just take it from there and win 2-0. Round 7 was my hardest match I think of Digimon I've ever had against Hudie Loop. Round 1, he blew me out. Round 2, I blew him out. And even then, after I did my BT13 Omni turn, I think that was play. That was on turn 4, so I got it really quickly. I hit into a Chitose Insecurity, and that allowed him to then play out on a Kilo, which gave him a blocker. And if I did not have, I think, the Ouryuken DNA, I would have just lost on the spot. So, because he also had a Kisuke, which made it so that, I think 2 Kisukes on that game. So my Dynasmon's effect was not able to DP minus that thing fully. And I didn't have any other types of removal, and he had enough security to where I couldn't just Evo into Omni X and then win.
Makes sense.
The third game was very down to the wire, and if you want more details on that one, check out the Digital Dorks podcast.
There you go.
And then my final round was another Royal Knights mirror. My opponent, I don't think, had much experience into the mirror, and he was also only running 1 copy of Dynasmon. I was hard mulliganing for it because going into it, we both got deck checked, and we were both sitting next to each other at the top table, so we both knew that we were playing Royal Knights. So from the get-go, I believe we were both hard mulliganing for like the cards that are better for that matchup. I mulliganed for Dynasmon both times. And game 1, my opening hand was Magnamon, Dynasmon, Alphamon Ouryuken, BT13 Omni, and Purge. So I was like, this is the perfect hand. I immediately just went turn 1 Magna, turn 2 Jesmon, turn 3 turn 2 Ouryuken, because I choked him at 1. I was like, you're not going to give me 9 memory to remove it. I called his bluff on that. He didn't. Turn 3, I just purged my Jesmon in the back, and I played out, I think, Crania just to be there. He was able to remove it. Crania goes in. BT13 Omni went for game. Game 2, I hard mulligan for Dynasmon. Got Dynasmon. Took a little bit longer, but after I think 3 Sistermon searches from Lord Knight and Sistermon, I found my copy of BT13 Omni, and then I just went for game. And that's basically the tournament run. Pretty smooth sailing all around, but there were a lot of key moments there where if I just played one card versus another, it would have been an easy loss. And that's like the main thing with this deck is because you only usually get like the 1 play on a turn. On average, maybe 1.5 things that you can do on a turn if you really want to do the math on it. Just that one action is just so much more impactful. And that's basically it. That's the run. That's the deck list.
All right, awesome. Thank you very, very much, AJ. I appreciate the time you took to explain that all to us.
Of course.
If you guys want to hear more about like how his run, about his run, he's gonna give more details on the DigiDorks podcast. Yeah. Me personally, I've been meaning to get more Beelsmon content out because I also played in this event. I topped as well. I got 4th place, but 4th place isn't as cool as 1st place Royal Knights. I do want to mention I was in table 2 in the final round, so like occasionally.
He was, and he won.
Yeah, and I won my last round, but I looked over. I would look over to the side every now and then, and I would just see AJ like play the BT13 Omni, get all his guys out. I would see him have the Dynasmon. I'm like, all right, he's got game, and then he'd go back to my game. It was actually really sick to see. But yeah, thank you very much, AJ.
Of course.
Hope to see you in the future in other topping regionals, and everybody else, take it easy.
See you.